Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.
Students of the world, gather round. It's time for the Global Student Podcast with our host, Mark and Darren.
And welcome once again to the World Student Outreach Podcast. Darren Sutherland, your host, Mark Kopinski, the expert in my, what do you call it, Mark? Co-host, co-host? What are you, Mark, from day to day? We you know what? You and I wear so many hats in life that we don't know what we are from 1 hour to the next. We just know to go to the next Outlook calendar appointment and do it. So what is Mark Kopinski doing today, and what are you today, my friend?
Boy, Darren, to answer your question, I'm here to do whatever you need me to do at this point. The sun is shining in northern New Jersey, and we're happy to be up and take another swing at it today. I think it's going to be a challenging month ahead as we try to reopen. I know you guys are a bit ahead of us down in Georgia, but I'm told some more of our shops and whatnot are going to start opening up this weekend. So we have our fingers crossed up here, Darren.
Well, we're all in this together, Mark, but let me say this to the folks in New Jersey. Thank you to the New Jersey linemen who have got you a lot clearer today on the phone line than you were in our last episode. In our last episode, we had a guest from Vietnam who we could hear so much better than hearing you in New Jersey. I'm in Atlanta, you're in New Jersey, and today our guest is joining us all the way from Calcutta, India. I'll let you introduce Gargi, but I just needed to throw some props out there to the New Jersey lineman. If Glenn Campbell was still around with us, we would have him write a song, saying the New Jersey lineman. I don't know that he would have the same vernacular as the Wichita lineman song, and our guest is probably wondering what in the world I'm talking about. I'll just let that lie for just a second, Mark. I think you understand. But introduce Gargi for us, Mark, and tell us a little bit about her background.
Gargi is from Calcutta, India, although she's well-traveled and throughout the country, working with students and parents as they make their journey into higher education, specifically higher education in the U.S. Gargi will explain it much more in detail than I can, but she falls into a category of admission coach, which are individual people that work with families and students to help them find and enroll in foreign universities. And we're going to be talking about the U.S. today, but she also helps students that end up going to other countries as well. So I would just invite Gargi in and let her introduce herself, and we'll have a chat a little bit about what she's hearing and seeing right now in India, what parents and students are thinking, and hopefully Gargi can give us an update on COVID-19 in India, because I know we're all experiencing it. We'd be curious to hear how India is handling the virus. Gargi, over to you. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning to you. Well, let me tell you, I'm plus 5.5 hours ahead of GMT. So it's really good evening for me.
Yes,
but
indeed.
Nevertheless, everything brings us so much closer now that we're talking together, and it's a pleasure to be with you on the show, Darren and Mark. Thanks very much for inviting me. To give you a little background about myself, I've been in the hospitality industry for a couple of decades, and I've been into hardcore operations, and I've also worked as a spa specialist, primarily looking at training and coaching. And the last 6 years, I've been looking at how young students wanting to go to the US, and having two sons of my own, I coached my older son who went across to a liberal arts college in Ohio, Denison University, with an 80% scholarship. Whoa. So that was something.
Yeah,
and it prompted me to help out his friends. And that's where my journey began. And since then, I've been involved and positioned as working as an independent consultant, talking to a lot of high school students, parents, and schools as well. And I also work with a few career counselors who are mostly looking at children's schooling in India and attending college in India. However, along the way, a lot of them change their minds and want to do maybe, a transfer program into the US. So I've really studied this bit well. It's not like, here is a professional who just decided to change her mind and do something else. For me, it hasn't been that way. I'm a trained life coach. I'm also a Green Belt certified global career counselor. And I also have a few credentials from eCornell in terms of executive leadership. So I'm well equipped to handle parents, students, school counselors, school principals as well. And how I've really been dealing with students over here is helping them understand and helping them, differentiate the process of education in India versus the process of education, of imparting and inculcating values and education in the true holistic sense of the word by traveling. Travel itself is a big part in educating a human being. Having said that, I'm going to wait for your question. So I think that's enough of an introduction about myself. I don't belong to Calcutta. I've traveled, around the globe, but I've just relocated here the past couple of years. And it's interesting to meet students and children from various parts of India and understand their outlooks and what they want out of education today. Parents have changed the way they are looking at overseas education. And let me tell you, because of COVID-19, parents are rethinking a lot of things, but they're also excited about maybe online onboarding. Why not?
Thank you so much for that great introduction. I'm going to get the politically correct question out of the way before we go any further with this interview because it's so important. And Mark, you and I and Gargi talked about this before we started. India has a population of 1,353,000,000 people. Okay. And that was in 2018. So it has grown some then. Gargi, Mark, you both know this. Not all Indian students want to be profiled as engineers or computer programmers. Gargi, give some categories that Indian students are looking for our U.S. admission counselors who are saying, I would recruit this Indian student, but he wants to be a doctor. He wants to be an engineer. He wants to be a computer scientist. Give us some other avenues that you see students coming to you and saying, hey, look, I want to major in this. What's some of the categories you're seeing, Gargi?
Dealing with kids the past 6 years and talking to parents, I see a paradigm shift in the way everybody is looking at education in the true sense of the word. It's not, there's a difference between being literate and being educated. So I think Indian parents have become more educated than we were a couple of decades back. Not every Indian parent wants an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or an architect. We are also stepping into a phase where we're hugely looking at liberal arts and science colleges here in India. So I think that's the thing that's exciting students and parents to look at maybe smaller private colleges, smaller private liberal arts universities in the US, where they're looking at English, majoring in English or journalism or photography or even filmmaking, if you want to say so. I had a student who was talking about sports management and kinesiology. Business is a big thing. Then you have various kinds of other things like culinary arts. Design is a big thing as well. So I see more and more parents are aware of, various other options that are available to them, and not just the cliched, and stereotyped doctors or engineers. So a lot of people are even going into education, teaching, training, business, of course, finance, economics. International studies is a big thing as well. That's a major that a lot of kids want to pursue nowadays. So that's something, I see that trend has really changed, and students are more open to talking about newer career options with their counselors, with their peer groups, and making a blueprint to pursue these newer options.
Mark, what you got?
Well, Darren, about a third of my work is with small liberal arts colleges scattered really from coast to coast. And Gargi had mentioned her son going to school in Ohio. I work with several very good small liberal arts colleges in Ohio that don't have anything in the area of engineering, computer science, all those technical degrees you mentioned. They don't even offer them. They're basically arts and science schools and humanities and the social sciences. So, there are a lot of kids from India pursuing these types of degrees and looking to get into businesses that Gargi is referring to. And it's really helpful to have someone like Gargi that is able to spend the time with parents and students, showing them what else is out there and what other paths to success. Because, certainly there are students that are following the hard sciences, but there are many things to do, in chemistry and biology and research areas that previous generations of Indian students haven't thought about. Gargi had mentioned the humanities and writing and filmmaking. And I think especially in her area in Calcutta, which has long been known for the poets and the writers of India, these kids are finding these liberal arts schools in the U.S. and the liberal arts schools are waking up to finding these students as well and spending time working with people like Gargi, going to the schools in India and developing relationships. Many of these small schools, and you have them in Georgia as well, Darren, are not well known abroad. But, and we've talked about this in previous shows, if you put in the time and develop relationships in these schools, and once you have one student and their parents on campus, you have a whole unit of promotion that you didn't previously have. And I find that international students' parents and also the students are the best people to help sell and promote your institution back home. And they do a fabulous job of it. And I have schools that they have 1, 2 students, and all of a sudden they have 5. And before long, they have 25. And, this is how it works. It takes some time, but you would be surprised how many liberal arts colleges around the United States have 15, 20 students from India studying humanities, social sciences, and some of the harder sciences, but not necessarily technology and engineering.
I want to break it down for both of you, and let's take it. Let me give you both an open-ended question here. We're speaking to the vice president of admissions or an admissions counselor at a school, let's just say in Arkansas, for lack of a better word, as an example, in the state of Arkansas, and they want to recruit students from India or Uganda or wherever. What's the best? And they're sitting there, Mark and Gargi, saying, there's no way, we don't have the budget to reach out to, visit these places. What is the thing, Mark, that these counselors need to do to start building that portfolio of international students from India and other places?
Well, one of the first things I do with an example like you just gave, and I always assume no one has any money to spend. I think going into anything, if you assume they don't have any money, that's probably the best way to go. I have never been on a college campus where the community at large, I'm talking about alumni, current students, faculty, staff, trustees, you name it, people associated with the institution. I've never been to a school that doesn't have connections in many of the major countries around the world. And certainly India is a great example of this. There is someone at that college, whether it's 500 students or 50,000 students, that are going to have connections to India. It may be a lone faculty member that for whatever reason ended up as a faculty member at the institution that has connections back home. It may be an alumni from 20 years ago that somehow found the institution. It may be other people in a small town in Ohio that have connections to India and also connections to the institution. But I always start there. I mean, it's really doing a people inventory of your institution to find out where those connections lie. And, we've talked in previous shows about the top 20 or 25 nations that send the most students to the U.S. And in almost every case, those top 20, 25 countries are somehow, some way represented on even the smallest of campuses. So I think you have to start there. And then as you broaden question of what the connections and opportunities might be, you start to meet people like Gargi, and you realize there are specialist admissions coaches in these countries that are willing and able and extremely helpful in terms of explaining institutions that these parents and students may not have heard of to possibly consider the school, very seriously and go through the admissions process. So I would start there and build off of that, and then turn it to Gargi, and Gargi can explain without going anywhere. I mean, we'd love to have schools travel to these places and really dig in deep. But if there is no money, then you find people like Gargi to help you who are already in India. Gargi, I'll throw it over to you to continue with that.
That would be step one, really, to figuring out, close alumnus and contacts through professors and family and friends. But if we're looking at a more structured and organized way of reaching out to students and parents and schools, we have a very nice, fine, wide web or mesh of counselors and consultants, and these institutions, if you may call them so, represent anywhere between 50 to 500 universities who may be working on a retainership plan or might be even working on a commission platform, and they're working for even small community colleges, some of these guys. Other than that, you've also got, Education USA. You've got the U.S. Consulate, which is represented by USIEF. So there is a lot of help available in terms of even if a university doesn't have an official office bearer or a representative in India, or maybe you don't have an alumnus standing in India, but there are institutions and organizations, and the U.S. Embassy is there for sure to help. And for services rendered to people locally here in India, the U.S. Embassy doesn't charge anything, which I think is a big boon to all the students, because their libraries are open. There are people there to help them. There's a special cell to help students who are looking at going overseas for either undergraduate or graduate studies. And I think if you would want to engage with a counselor, that would be a paid exercise. But just to go and collect information, attend webinars or seminars being hosted from the consulate is all free of cost. And I think, colleges and universities can look at that aspect as a more serious way of reaching a wider audience in India.
We have a lot of faith-based institutions here in the States that recruit students worldwide, and some of them may have stereotypes when it comes to Indian population from their faith standpoint. Should those colleges or universities, Gargi, should they worry about their recruitment of students in India and how those students are going to transition to their campuses and their atmospheres?
If I were a university in the U.S. looking at reaching out to students in India, I would definitely do my due diligence. And mind you, these organizations are all very professional, and they have their accreditations from bodies in the U.S., bodies, governing bodies here in India as well. So I would really, do a study, do an analysis, and, before I even sign a contract with anyone. So there are loopholes everywhere. People are very good at making fake presentations and fake papers and contracts, but there are organizations, well-known organizations who are into this and that work very closely with other U.S. universities. And there are alliances. There are bodies that have alliances of universities and who work as a conglomerate. So I think it would just make better sense to study that bit before, stepping into an area that you don't know. It always helps to work through a network and through references. I think that is, taking a calculated risk. No risk at all, in fact. It's a calculated strategy by wherein you would, have timelines and milestones, and you would, make entry into the country.
Sorry, I would just add, I work with a lot of faith-based institutions in the U.S., whether it be Catholic or Methodist or Lutheran or what have you. And I think it's actually more an advantage than less to be a faith-based institution. I think parents, not just in India, but around the world, see a big benefit in institutions that are faith-based and their interest in taking care of the whole person. They may not be from that faith. They may not have any particular faith, but they see the value in an institution that is driven by its religious root. And if you look at the data in the United States, we have a lot of faith-based institutions, and almost all of them, if not all of them, have international students. I think if you are a faith-based institution and you're concerned about going abroad and trying to develop the right messaging, I would certainly start. If I'm a Catholic school, I would certainly start with the Catholic population and the churches in a place like India or anywhere else in the world, because you're certainly talking to like-minded people there, and then expand out from there. And in some markets, which we'll be talking about in future shows, most of the recruiting from these institutions is faith-based related. So I don't think schools should shy away from that. Gargi probably has some personal opinions on that from a parent standpoint, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that, Gargi.
We term ourselves as a secular country. We are tolerant of all faiths and all practices, and we have all kinds in the country. I might be following a different way of life when we term that as religion. It's rather cliched, but I'm sorry, I have to use that. But I've been educated in a convent school ever since I could speak my first vowels. In India, people are not really looking so much as where they are going, what faith it is so a person who is practicing Islam at home might go to a Christian university, might go to a Christian school. We're very, very tolerant here. It's just a handful of incidents that might arise, or people might have that kind of baggage. But overall, if I were to take a panoramic view, I think we're very tolerant, and students are very open to going and studying elsewhere where, there's a different, there are many Jesuit schools here in India, and we have students from all kinds of faiths attending, going to chapel and then going to beginning school in the morning. So that is the least of a parent's concern, I would say, here in India.
Let's take it from 30,000 feet that we've been talking at the beginning of the show in the last 8 or 9 minutes of this podcast. And let's break it down to one-on-one, what we're seeing on the ground. Gargi, explain to our listeners, when you go in to talk to a parent as an education consultant, what are these parents looking for before they send their child to the U.S. to school? Because guess what? They're still their babies, okay? Even though they're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, these kids are going halfway across the globe to a place that the parents may or may not be excited about, or maybe they are, but there's still some security and some fear in their eyes. What are you seeing when you talk to these parents, and what are these parents saying to you?
We might have a city going, a child who's based in the city going to a small liberal arts college, placed in a hamlet. The parents are worried, will my child get vegetarian food? Will my child get this kind of food? So parents are picky and choosy about that as well. They're also looking at good faculty in terms of the child's academic growth, because ultimately the parents are looking at ROI on the child's education. They're investing a lot of money there. They're also looking at what is the future of the child in terms of getting some internship. So another very important aspect that I think, Mark, I'm going to take the liberty of mentioning is the main attraction would be the CPT and the OPT, wherein the child gets to work on his F1 visa, gather real-time paid work experience during year 1 and year 2 and year 3. And then also he has, if he's a STEM student, he gets up to 3 years to work in the country. So he's gathering diversified work experience. So if he were to come back to India, his degree and his experience compared to a child who's already here, it would be, I don't have to lay it out to balance it for you, but it would be, he would be held in greater esteem. A better qualified, experienced workforce is what he would be termed as. So these are some of the important things that a parent would be looking at. Of course, best fit and best value colleges are to be kept in mind, because most Indian parents and students are not just looking at a bachelor's program, they're also looking at a master's program. So any money saved is really money earned to be put in for higher education.
Mark, you know what term I love Gargi mentioned in her little talk right there? Better than anything else, and I wrote this down. And we never see this in the state, okay? In the States. You know what term that is?
Well, I'm listening to best fit. Is that what you wrote down?
No, I wrote down ROI, return on investment.
Oh,
And here's what I mean, Mark.
Well, the two are simpatical.
Yeah, here's what I mean. And think about this. How many students do we see in the U.S. go to a private institution and spend $40,000, $60,000, $80,000 a year on a degree that they could have went to a local community college and spent $6,000 on the same degree, got the same education, and ended up with the same exact job? That's a story and an episode for another day. What do you think?
Well, I don't think there's any question that has to be questioned. And I think, what we're going through right now is going to question higher education in all of its forms, from how it's delivered, where it's delivered, what's being delivered, and to your point, the ROI. And back to Gargi's point, I mean, if you're doing your homework either on your own or with your parents or with a guide like Gargi, you are looking for a best fit institution, which speaks to all of the things that you're talking about, which speaks to return on investment. When you think of a student going 10, 15,000 miles away from home to a country they likely have never been to an institution they know only about through pamphlets and the website and maybe some university people they've spoken to or met. I mean, that's a big undertaking. I mean, for 35 years, I've been in this business, and I'm so impressed with these young people that are willing to do that. I mean, that's such a leap of faith. And you think about it, I mean, more than 75% of all American students that attend a university have visited at least once before they've enrolled. Most, 85, 90% of international students that come to the U.S. and enroll at a university have not been to the U.S., nor have they been to that university before they enroll. So they have to do as much work as they can to know where they're going, and then take a huge leap of faith there, and that this is the right place for them. So the return on investment has to be there, because the investment of both time and money is so great. How do our listeners get a hold of you, especially our university listeners, or I guess even parents, because you certainly could advise parents from anywhere in the world, not just India. Do you have a Twitter handle or an email address or a website that we could share with the audience?
Well, I have my little website. It's called www.instarlife.com, INSTARLIFE.com. And there's a meaning in that name. When I say instar, it's really the in-between stages from a chrysalis to a butterfly. It's actually, using your own potentials and moving from one stage to the next. So for me, it's all about empowering the child to look at the next phase of life.
No doubt. Gargi, thank you so much for joining us today on the World Student Podcast and giving a brief overview. I know we could probably sit here for the next 2 hours and discuss everything going on, but you've got an incredible population, an incredible growing population, an incredible educated growing population, over 1 billion people. So I know you're going to stay busy there in your country. And thank you for joining Mark and I once again.
Thanks so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much again for being a part of our show today. Mark, as always, thank you, my friend. How can folks get a hold of you?
They can get me at kopensky@me.com. That's the easiest way, or of course on our website at gsra.org.uk, Darren. You guys be safe down in Georgia and show us the way to reopening the economy, please.
No problem. Mark, one other question I've got for you. If they can spell Kopensky, they get free ROI. So spell that out for everybody.
It's the Polish power, Darren. So it's Kopensky.
All righty. Thank you so much, Mark. You've been listening to World Student Podcast with Darren and Mark. Thank you, Gargi, for being our guest all the way from Calcutta, India today. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the World Student Podcast. For more information on how you can be a part of this podcast and information on international student recruitment, email us at worldstudentpodcast@gmail.com. And please leave a remark in the remarks section. This podcast was a production of BG Podcast Network. Jonathan Giles, producer. Jacob Sutherland, director.
Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.